Let's talk all about AI in business. It's hosted by Brent Muller. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast.
Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Future Proof Podcast. I'm your host, Brent Muller. I am joined today by Guy Rocourt from Guy Rocourt Consulting, as well as many other things. So Guy's got a great story. He comes from the cannabis industry. So Guy, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. All right. So first thing we always do is let's start with your background and your journey up to where you're at today.
Sure. I'll try to give you the abbreviated version. I'm about to be 54, so it's been a minute. I'm originally from New York City, first generation American. My parents are Haitian, hence the name Guy. I got out of New York by joining the military and with aspirations to go to college. So luckily back then in the 80s, I was able to qualify for a program called Broadened Opportunity for Officer Selection and Training. So I went to San Diego boot camp, then went to an A school. I did a little tour on submarines and then got to my boost school where I basically did like some remedial high school stuff, got a ROTC scholarship and went to Rochester Institute of Technology where I studied physics. And I thought for sure I would go back nuke power. I was ready, Back then it was the Cold War and everything. And, surprise, surprise, with everything that's going on today, the Cold War ended. And I thought we had defeated the Russian bear, as they say. I literally didn't know enough about global politics. So I was like, oh, peace on earth. And, I was dating this girl who was a photographer and she was doing exposure latitudes, which is basic math. And all of a sudden I could see the light and, I was like, oh, maybe there's not a career in the military anymore, given that America's won. At that time was like doing the downsizing thing. So I turned in my scholarship, switched my major to film, graduated with a film degree, got to New York. My timing has always been lucky for me. Right then there was a low budget revolution. So I started working in the film industry, quickly made my way into the DGA. And then I did a movie with Montel Williams. Some people might remember him, a talk show host. He had just with his MS. I didn't really, I didn't realize how conservative I was back then. I don't know that we use those terms the same way.
Yeah.
But in the military, I went to a conservative college. Sure, I knew about cannabis, but it wasn't a big part of my life. I hear it as I meet Montel and he's using it and it clearly is a thing that works for him medicinally. And that's when I also start to realize that all analgesics have the potential for abuse. But before that happens, they go to the ailment. So Montel's using huge amounts of cannabis. And I can't ever say that I saw him stoned or high. Similarly, if you're in pain and you take OxyContin, it's not the same way that you would take it if you were using it to abuse it, right? So
right.
Eyes are open. I start advocating with Montel. He and I become really good friends. He helps me get a job here in California in 1999 at Paramount Pictures. And as soon as I get to Los Angeles, I see what's happening in the cannabis industry, right? And, as a New Yorker, if anybody's listening that's a New Yorker, they'll understand. New Yorkers think the whole world revolves around New York.
Yes, they do.
Never left, right?
Right.
Coming to California, I'm like, the film industry here is whatever. Needless to say, fast forward, I start to get more and more involved in the cannabis industry when my contract at Paramount comes up. They were doing all this crazy vertical integration of Viacom. I knew vertical integration of media would not serve us then. We should have stopped it, as now we see the fallout of that.
Yeah.
So I decide not to renew my contract at Viacom and go into this cannabis thing thinking, oh, any minute is going to be legal. Well, some 15 odd years slip and I become a little bit of an outlaw, which I define as somebody that stands outside the law because they believe it's unjust. And while we 215, it was kind of like what we have with the hemp bill now, where there is a rule, but no legislation around it, no framework. So everybody's interpreting it the way they want, right? So it was a little bit wild west, but it was great. The cannabis community is very awesome, in my opinion. So I work in, luckily we had also this thing called no doc loans. I'm sure people will remember.
Yeah.
Here we're scooping up houses. We're converting them to provide safe access. And of course, after the crash in 2008, the ladies keep paying. So everything was great. By about 2010, I saw my first electronic cigarette. And I was like, oh, we got to put cannabis in that. So I developed this formula with my partner and we started sending them out to some of our friends. And of course, all these VC folks in New York that never sleep, never really wanted to smoke cannabis, decided to try the fun electronic pen, get good night's sleep, and all they want to do is write checks.
Yeah.
California had just failed Proposition 19. I get a call from some folks. They're like, "Oh, what do you know about Colorado?" I'm like, "Not much besides units moving there on the way east." They're like, "Would you like to come out and check out this distressed asset?" I did not know that term at first.
You do now, right?
Yeah, check it. And you know, I like to say that because I don't like to be a hypocrite. I would not do that today. There are a lot of things that I did when I was younger that I've
Yeah,
learned, and I'm fine with. You know, I believe that mistakes are lessons if you look at them and acknowledge,
absolutely.
cognizant of acknowledging mistakes that I've made so I can learn from them. So we took over this woman's dispensary or this woman's bakery because she couldn't afford to figure out how to get into the compliance scheme as it was rolling out in 2011 in Colorado. And I turned that into the first C1D1 lab to create light hydrocarbon extracts. And I like saying that because it's important, because I, like everybody else, started with a scarcity mindset, a prohibition mindset, and this need to over refine cannabis and this focus on potency.
Right.
Of course, that's not how any other product works, but that's how you know, as an emerging industry, we dove into that.
Right.
Luckily, a few years later, I meet my partner at Papa and Barkley. I get more involved in that capital raise, and that brand we decide to make clean from start to finish. And luckily, I have this aha moment of like, wait, cannabis advocacy was about plant medicine, not potency, not like this the CPG overlay that was already starting to happen in the early days. I was like, wait, no, that's not right. We need to set the bar and standards now based on what we have. So anyway, I create Pop and Barkley. I grow that for 8 years. We raise 70 million bucks. It becomes like, you know, a flagship of California cannabis, straddling wellness and making the wellness lane, right? Not medicinal, because I don't think that's right. Not recreational, but the real bailiwick of cannabis, which is wellness. That also lets me become more known for in the industry. I'd already started speaking way back in 2014, 2015 at NCIA and CIA and all these other industries. Before that, I was very quiet. But I think the minute I had the opportunity to have a legal stance and kind of devolve some of my grows and be a little bit more secure, you know, because I, of course, raised my family, my kid was, you know, gone to college, all this stuff.
Right.
Like now I can be more vocal. And I think once I opened my mouth, it was impossible for me to shut up, just like now. So I'll stop there. That's kind
No,
of
I
like,
love that, Guy. I mean, that's exactly. Oh, that's exactly what you need to be, and I love the fact that you kind of have that background and that history. So, talk to us about like now, right? You're exited out of that, right? And now you're thinking, all right, what's my next frontier? You obviously have this industry expertise, right? It's only going to expand. So, what's next? Do you think?
yeah. So, you know, advocacy is what's next, because it's interesting. You know, when we were, you know, you cut 20 years ago, let's say, everybody was behind in a line focused on the plant. I like to use the NRA as an example because they have one mantra: Second Amendment, Second Amendment. Everybody, their lobbyists are focused, laser focused on what their constituents need. When we were trying to legalize cannabis, it was very laser focused on freeing the plant. That started happening in states. It's obviously have not happened on the federal level. And then we have what's going on in the hemp industry due to the Farm Bill. And now we're kind of fractured again. And so having had some successful exits, having my product still be on shelf, and having a little bit of respect from the industry, most of what I've been doing these days is just trying to give back and be that voice of like, wait, we need to stick together and make sure that we finish this all the way to the federal level. Like even
Right.
now to have the folks, the new head of the DA talking reefer madness, it's like, wait, you know, we still, the fight's not over, you guys, right? I know lots of people have made money. You have some of the bigger MSOs, you have some of the you know, different stakeholders in states that have manipulated their little fiefdoms, but
Right.
that's not good enough. We're just a bunch of little isolated folks making money. We need to come together and really make this industry work. You know, when I was a licensed producer here in California, I was like, oh, what are these hemp folks doing? Now I have an e-commerce, hemp derived, same products, right? We're literally playing semantics. The federal government has, you know, allowed the hemp brothers and sisters to make a de facto legal cannabis market from hemp derived, but it's the same things that are being sold in dispensaries, because if you step back and just put scientific terms on it, they're not growing rudorellis. They're not growing what the Farm Bill intended, which I believe is not CBD. It was to maybe lower corn and soy production, give us more fibrous stock for bioplastics, and
Right.
build that other leg that cannabis can save us, right? The medicinal and recreational aspects, that's only one component. There's this huge industrial component around hemp or cannabis, depending on what you want to call it, that I thought the Farm Bill would give us, but somehow it got kind of carpet bagged into this CBD thing, then all these different isomers, which are an issue. And then, of course, eventually THCA from hemp. So right now, what I do is I try to just speak truthful science, repeat it often, and hope that folks start realizing, oh, wait, there's a game of semantics happening. Both the licensed cannabis folks and the hemp folks are actually on the same side, behind the leaf, as I call it, trying to figure out how we really free this. I'm a student of a person called Jack Hera. If folks don't know him, definitely look him up. Jack told us that cannabis can give us food, clothing, shelter, right? Or some people say food, clothing, medicine. The point being is like, yes, we have these medicinal components. We have this food stuff in the hemp seed that is so powerful that really should be our filler, right? And
Right.
then this fibrous stock that can make, from cellulose. I posted this thing the other day about Henry Ford's soybean / hemp car. People argue, was it mostly soybean? Was it mostly hemp? I think the point is it was plant-based bioplastics. George Eastman in the late 30s coming out with hemp-based cellulose for film. Like we
Right.
these things, and I understand why most things want to be petroleum byproducts, but the day of petroleum is ending. It's a finite resource and it's held by a few that are desperately trying to hold on to that economic control, but it's not sustainable, right? That is the true gift of legalization and abundance. And we've lost that. We've lost, a lot of the folks that I learned from, that I mentored, have gotten too old for the fight. And this new generation with social media, like I have kids, they don't seem to have the same grit or the same ability to articulate their values the way our generation might have. So I find myself kind of like, not that old, but kind of like feeling a little bit old and kind of feeling like the old man in the room that has to say, hey, we have a fight on our hands. We have to continue to push real cannabis science and get this information all the way through the feds so that we can get real reform. So that's mostly what I do these days. It's not particularly monetizable, but right now it's the right thing to do.
Well, and with your background, I think it's kind of cool that you're the statesman, and you don't even have to say the elder statesman, but you're the statesman in the room that has that background that can articulate it because you've seen the change in the industry and where we're at, and you see the roadblock, right? But you also know what's on the other side, and I don't know if all the younger generation know what's on the other side yet, right? What can we unlock, right? And so you hit across three big things, and I think most people only realize the one, right? The medicinal, right? Everyone knows that hemp, cannabis, whatever you want to call it, can really help, right, with pain ailments and a lot of treatments that we never had before, right? It's already kind of moving that way. But those other two that you mentioned, I don't think most people know that.
No,
As a matter of fact, the third one I didn't know at all until you just said that.
yeah, I mean, energy density is a big one, right? So it's somewhat, it's text. So if you think about, I had 10 acres of corn that I was going to reduce down to ethanol, right? Which we put in
Right.
all our fuel. You would
Yep.
only need an acre of hemp seed oil to do the same energy density. A good example is you can go
So you're
online.
talking 10 to 1 less footprint,
That's right.
or
Right.
10 to 1 better output, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And that's before we get into the actual just soil economics. Hemp is a bioremediator and
Mhm.
and does not want to salt the land. It's literally a weed. It's just much easier to grow. In a way, that's why it's a threat. It's almost like, if I had to be slightly conspiracy theory, we want energy resources to be scarce because then they're controllable. Abundant
Right.
energy, you would think, if I said, oh, I have the cure for abundant energy, you'd be like, oh, well, we need that.
Yeah,
But
we do.
from a societal construct, there's a little bit of fear around that. I learned this the hard way or the easy way. I told you I was on a submarine. I've felt the warmth and the glow of a reactor. I do not fear nuclear power. Sure,
Right.
mistakes have been made, but I can tell you, if there's somebody in the nuclear industry listening right now, they are constantly looking for new people to come in because they need to be legitimized. Because sure, nuclear, we think about the nuclear word and we're like, oh, it's kind of scary. But the fact is, nuclear energy is this potential of clean energy, abundant electricity, free electricity. When you think about the Chinese building 20 some odd plants over the last decade, they're not stupid. It's like, that's abundant energy. And here we're still stuck in fossil fuels, finite energy that a few people can control, right? So, as not a capitalist, which I am, everybody wants to make money. That's an
Yeah.
American thing. But if I just think as a steward of the world, as a good citizen, yeah, nuke power and plant-based resources would give us infinite energy. That would change the economic structure of our world and definitely our nation. And people fear that. I get it. But yes, hemp as a renewable resource for energy 100%. Now, when we talk about just renewable stuff, you know how we recycle paper and whatnot?
Yeah.
That's good. I think we should do that. But when you think about Ruderellis in one season really only being from, let's call it early June to October, growing 3 and 4 inches around of fiber, we could create all the paper we want without ever cutting down another tree. That's in fact one of the reasons why hemp was outlawed back in the day, because they did not want to stop the logging industry. It seemed like a threat at that point. So now, as we start to talk about sustainability and we start to talk about deforestation, things that I've known my entire life, you would have thought we saw
Right.
things in the knees. Hemp is right there to save us.
Amazing. Amazing. And I got to tell you, I would bet you less than 5% of the population know anything that you just said is possible.
Yeah.
So Guy, how do we get people better educated, right? Like to me, this is like we need to get you out on a platform, right? Because this is amazing. I didn't know half of this stuff.
So, you know, what's interesting is there's like the Ganja program, there's GPS. There's a lot of people talking about cannabis, the medicine, right?
Right.
And you're right, the focus, but there are, you know, look, the hemp brothers and sisters do talk about hemp, and we do talk about hemp as a renewable resource, but there's a little field of dreams things happening, right? Like I'd love this t-shirt, for instance, to be made out of hemp. Right. And yes, the cotton folks have finally figured out closed loop cotton production. Like we were talking about 5 years ago, I'd be going off on cotton production because literally the chemicals to process our cotton that were just not being reused and being dumped into God knows where were,
Yeah.
we were raising red flags back then. But now there are closed loop cotton production systems where at least we're recycling the chemicals, and it's gotten a lot cleaner. So I don't want to disparage the cotton industry, but cotton, like to at least be 50-50 cotton hemp, it would just be better. Here it is, we're again going to disrupt an industry. There are many entrenched industries, so corn, cotton, that really don't want hemp to come in. I don't think the farmers care because they're just growing on their.
Yeah, they'll farm either, right?
I think it's the infrastructure. I think if you have a factory, and I said to you, you need to retool your cotton factory to take in hemp, well, that's capital expenditure that you may not want to do. And if the feds are already subsidizing you, why would you bother? Right? So this definitely has to come from the top. It has to be leadership looking
Totally
at what
makes sense.
in the future and saying, hey, not today, Mr. Factory owner, but 10 years from now, you need to incorporate this much biomass. Hey, instead of me giving you $200,000 for corn production or soy production, I'm going to give you $100,000 for the corn and soy you're doing, but I'm going to give you another 150 if you start growing hemp. I know that there's not a lot of outlets for it, but it's that field of dreams. You have to build it and make it.
And it'll come, right? I totally get that. So Guy, right? Tell me how we get past this, and tell me what you look down the road the next 1 to 2 years for this industry.
Wow. Okay. So it twofold on this medicinal recreational side. We need the infighting to stop between the e-commerce derived from hemp and individual stakeholders in different states that have licensed programs, right? It's not sustainable. They're trying to sell the same product. They're further. This is already a new thing that, to your point, the consumer does not understand. The average layman does not understand. And the infighting is just spewing out even more information, using terms inappropriately, semantics. It's just crazy, right?
Yeah.
So that, I think, is the first thing that just needs to be looked at. And again, it does take, I'll just be candid. I think that in Washington, we're not looking at the important issues. We're not looking at long-term issues, right? And so I think a lot of the buzzwords, which I won't mention now because I don't think we need this to be politically charged, but a lot of the buzzwords and things that you see on the news are literally not important. They have nothing to do with our future. And that's where the conversation needs to change. You know, we don't talk about oil sustainability. We don't talk about energy resources. We don't talk about all our land being salted and how we're going to remediate that, right? We don't talk about the cleanliness of our food. Right? We talk about things that are like, I don't care about somebody else's business. I don't care what you do at home. I care about long-term planning for the future for my kids, not for me, for the next generation.
Like the generation after that, right?
Yeah, what I don't hear in Washington is, what are we doing to plan for the future? I hear a lot about family values. Okay, well, I have a family. And my values are, what world will they inherit? Not what somebody else's family is doing. So I'll leave it there. But I think the only way this gets fixed is if we start to have a conversation on a national level about what is best for our nation tomorrow, right? Because it doesn't need to happen overnight. We don't need to be scared, right? But because we're not having the conversation, we allow certain stakeholders who are currently enriched by the system, they're going to milk that cow until it's dead. And then a dead cow serves nobody. Whereas
Right.
what we should be doing is maybe not milking that cow, leaving it, using it as necessary and getting another, right,
Right.
that they don't own. And that's not, or maybe make better investments based on where the future is going. So it's, yeah, I don't have an answer. It's very frustrating. I think that all
Yeah.
we can do is continue to have the conversation. And to your point, so many people don't know this and are not hearing it and don't understand how actually urgent it is. It is the conversation we should be having, especially the energy one. On the medicine side and the food side, one of the things that I have on LinkedIn is my clean label campaign. We now know, and I think more and more Americans are understanding that our food has been gamified. The tobacco industry or whoever
100%.
came in and started making our food not good for us, right? Well, cannabis has been overregulated. And one of the things I found as a formulator was like, oh, I can make something that's, shelf stable for a year and not have to put any preservatives or emulsifiers. So these things in the supermarket that are 2, 3 year shelf life, who does that serve? It serves a manufacturer. It was a
Right.
hurdle for me, but now that I've cleared it, I'm like, well, why isn't everybody doing that? Or, when we make cannabis products, because especially in California, when they're tested final form, it's not the cannabis that tests bad. It's everything else that has residual pesticides, residual solvents. This concept of what generally regarded as safe, is it really? Like, who
Right.
came up with that term, right? So I would love for cannabis to lead the way as a new form of CPG that is cleaner and better. But most of the industry is trying to go backwards because as the money comes in, the money
You
wants us
follow the money. Yeah.
like CPG is now.
Yeah.
And what I often say to people is that hasn't served the consumer, right? So I'm a consumer advocate because I think that's the best form of capitalism, because I think that there's a way to make money and do right by the consumer. That should be the future. I think about
Yeah.
our team, we started to look under the hood, and definitely our kids are looking under the hood about what brands stand for and what
Hmm.
brand are. It used to be about colors and three stripes and rules of three. And now it's like, what do you stand for? That's a little bit, maybe that's where the change will start with this next generation of kids really thinking about, "Oh, I'm buying this brand beyond the quality of it because of the values that the company holds.
That it stands behind. Right.
Berries or a Patagonia, these kinds of brands, right, where you'll pay extra for that. Maybe that'll help us lead into the future. I don't know.
Yeah. No, and Guy, I think you're right about, there needs to be this industry has been left to its own devices and fragmented for a long time. And if we could get people to understand all the things that you just talked about, I think there would be momentum behind it to change it for the better, right? And you're right. In this case, just like other industries, it needs to be treated more like the other energy, especially the energy side, the other energy sectors, right? I mean, you don't regulate, oil state by state, right? You don't everything. So this would be no different. And so that's why I think you're onto something here. So as you think about those three things, right? And if you had, all the support in the world, how can coming back to the podcast theme, right? How can AI, data, automation, RPA, any of that accelerate that stuff that you just talked about?
Yeah. I think the beauty of AI is we all, like, I used to joke with my kids, like anytime they ask me something, I'm like, you have a supercomputer in your pocket. Like the notion of webjucation, right?
Yeah.
So when I talk about my journey, there's so much that I can do, right? Rewire a house and all these things. And it started with what were originally forums and stuff. Like you go online and you'd see like people talking
Yeah.
on forums. Well, I was highly motivated, but it's gotten easier and easier and easier to get information. And now, if you ask a language model a question, it will give you an answer. We need to make sure we're good stewards of those answers being truthful and fact based.
Amen to that.
But for the most part, they are, right? The people who program them, it's accessing a bunch of data, or like if you look at the new version of chat with deep research, it can
Hmm.
go in and it can draw a bunch of information and put out reasonable answers. So it does start with people wanting to know information. The information's always been out there, but I think the cool thing about AI is now it's just even easier. You don't even have to type. You can just literally ask. You can like
Yeah.
on this new phone, you can just click it and be like, what is hemp do? And you'll get a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean? What is the energy density of hemp v corn? And you're going to get some kind of a whole bunch of stuff that
Yeah.
will elucidate, what what the answer to your question is. And so I think AI is basically sort of that chip in your brain. You're holding it in your hand, but it is that supercomputer that has made it. I just have to ask. I don't even have to open the phone. I just have to ask the question and it's going to be there. Now, what AI can't do for us, not yet anyway, and maybe we don't want it to, is strategic planning. So we can
Right.
have the answers, right? And AI is like, I joke with my kids, it's like it's advanced spell checking, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you can use to write a paper, but it's going to be devoid of your voice. You can use your voice and have it edit for clarity, grammar, and spelling, but the
Yeah.
strategy, the overall heart of the principles of it to come from you. So now with AI, we have all this information. If I was, let's say, a legislator and I was trying to come up with a new energy bill, I would say to chat something like, what ways could I improve energy resources in the US? Right?
Yeah.
And I have to
Now you're
actually do
talking.
I have to try that prompt because I
Yeah.
would not be surprised if hemp came into the conversation right there. It's a
It absolutely
logic.
should. Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So, no, this is fascinating. And I think we're going to have you back later in the year. And like I said, we have these other podcasts I got to introduce you to pretty quickly because this is a great topic to be talking about. And to me, the more that your voice is out there explaining this, I think you're a phenomenal statesman of this, is educating the rest of the country on those other two areas that very few people know what the impact could be. If more people knew the possible impact, the groundswell would be and the voices would be loud, right?
Yeah.
I just don't think people know that all the possibilities of hemp. When everybody I know that talks about hemp and CBD, it's really medicinal only is the thought, right? Energy never came into the equation. And then when you start to get into the clothing and the other stuff that you were talking about and the materials that you can do, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And of course,
So,
hemp, I have a good friend up in Canada that's doing 3D printing, but he's formulating from hempcrete, right? Again, a natural resource to make this great building material. Again, I have to just say that folks have known this, right? And there is a need to suppress it. Back in World War II, there was a film called Hemp for Victory when we encouraged farmers, even though it was prohibited, to start growing hemp for the war effort. That movie disappeared from the Library of Congress, and the gentleman I was talking about, Jack Hara, and some other folks found the film in the late 70s and had to return it to the Library of Congress, right? So sometimes when we think about these conspiracies around hemp, they are real, but they are based on this notion of energy is a resource that we all need, and the
right.
control mechanisms of it are very protected, right? So there's a reason why I think we're not talking widely about the energy part of it, right? Farmers threatened by the medicinal part and they're dealing with it, but the energy sector just does not really want any part of the bioplastics. Basically right now we're still in the mindset of everything needs to come from that black gold,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard of peak oil. I don't know if we passed it, if we're going to pass it. It doesn't seem like it. But I do believe that oil is finite, like it can't last forever. The question
Right.
is, people believe that it's going to last for another 100 years, and some people believe that it could end tomorrow. I
Right.
don't know what that answer is, though.
Yeah, but even if it could last another 100 years, it doesn't mean that we should be neglecting another powerful source. Like we need all you can get, right? So everything that's going to be powered by AI will require more and more energy. And so it's not just batteries and it's not just oil, it's all. We need it all. So I told you I was going to ask, this has been fascinating. I told you I was going to ask a couple cool questions at the end. One is, what's something Guy has done personally or just facilitate your next part of your business with AI that other founders and CEOs would find interesting?
Well, I mean, I assume everybody's doing it, but maybe not. And that's create ads. I wish I could show you now, but like my wife and I have been using in video. I don't, not that I'm recommending any of these because we've
No,
used
no,
up
but there's tools, similar tools. You could name them. It's fine.
in video, Flux Pro AI, Sora, and
Yeah.
these video image creators. We've created ads that are, to me, Madison Avenue quality, right? So my wife launched a hemp derived brand called Clea Midlife, focused on women in midlife.
And we'll
Most
put the link to that below. Yeah, when we put the podcast up. Yep.
so our professional designer uses MidJourney, right? So
MidJourney's awesome.
a lot of the women that you see in our ads are not real people. They do not
Yeah.
exist in real life. It's kind of crazy, right? As I've been doing messaging, I posted on LinkedIn this great field with this hemp matriarch, and she's holding a sign that says all cannabis is wellness. She doesn't exist. I didn't hire a photographer to do that.
Yeah.
So I think the most interesting thing that I've done to leverage AI is I was never really into content creation. And luckily, as the world has aligned, fallen in right during this AI revolution, I heard the call to learn my AI tools. So I took a month or two to start, buying these, doing trials, some
Yeah.
of it
Yeah.
to like, or sometimes you do a trial and you forget to cancel it.
Yeah. I do that all the time.
Yeah, and really doing a deep dive and understanding that they are tools. And like any craftsman, one tool doesn't create a project. And so you do something here and then you bring that over into another AI program and remanipulate it. And before you know it, you get an image. And, we were talking about getting information out. An image is worth 1,000 words, as they say, right?
Amen.
So I posted that field that doesn't exist with a woman
Yeah.
who does not exist, but it
Yeah.
looks like beautiful lighting. It's a very compelling, engaging photograph. Sure enough, everybody's commenting and everybody's being part of the conversation. Now, I could have hired a professional photographer and taken weeks to get that one shot. I could have written
Yeah.
a whole book of text, but within an afternoon, I created an amazing post that articulated the vibe of what I wanted to say, and I started an engaging conversation. So I think the most interesting thing I've done is figured out how to re-articulate my voice and meaning through AI, right? Especially the visual medium. Like chat was awesome. When I first, I was still working at Papa Barkley when we were doing chat and it was, that was fun. But the visual stuff is
Amazing.
it's like
Yeah.
you can make a little, yeah, and I did take a class on prompting, right? So you
Mhm.
can it and then remix it and reprompt it and get video out that just says exactly what you want to say. And most of us are visual learners, even though we all learn to sit and read in school. Most of us
Picture's
just want,
worth 1,000 words, right? No
yeah,
doubt about it. Yeah. 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 Check out ARC ads too. We've used that one to a lot.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's a ton of out there, and I love that you're doing this. It's fantastic because when you realize how to leverage the right things to get the outcome that you desire, it's next level stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So last question. So if I can give you a magic wand for you, and again, you have a lot of different paths you might go down, but and just you can even use your wife's business, to meet or exceed your growth goals in the next 12 months. What would be the number one thing you would be to get you there?
If I could wave a magic wand, I would hope that clear regulations come out so that I can conduct business. I mean, that's just a factor of my business, right? Is
Exactly.
that
It has to be.
unregulated brings a certain amount of uncertainty, which is unnerving. So if I really truly had just a wand, I know it's not a sexy answer. I would just want,
But for your industry, it means something. Yeah.
yeah, I just would want the feds and industry professionals to come together and put out some base regulations that are based in science and say, hey, yes, I do believe we need regulations, things 21 and older, percentages, EMP style manufacturing, layer it all on. Let's get that out so that I can comply. I am
Yeah.
ready to comply. You just need to let me know exactly
What you're complying with, right? What are the rules? Yeah.
Once we do that, once we have rules, we can play a game. Without rules, we're not. I am ready to work hard and compete. I always say that like, just because I give you a pencil and I take a pencil, it doesn't make us both artists. Just because
Yeah.
I'm in my lab and you're in your lab and doesn't make us, I don't, it's not that I don't believe in IP, but like you can have two chefs with the same cookbook and the same ingredients, and they are not going to give you the same food. That is the
Amen.
beauty of our world and human beings, right? So all I want is a fair level playing field so that I can do my best and let others do their best, and then we'll see what happens. But at the end, we all win because we will get the best out of us.
Yeah. Right. And you know what's great about that is if you had those two chefs like you talked about, there's an audience that likes Chef A and an audience that likes Chef B and a bunch of people that like them both.
That's right.
And that's what's great. That's why the consumer wins. So I love it. Before I get this thing up and live, and we'll put all the links below, but tell everybody how to get in touch with you.
Absolutely. So on Instagram and LinkedIn, you can find me at Guy Rocourt or at Guy Rocourt Consulting. On LinkedIn, definitely follow the Clean Label movement. And then, of course, check out my wife's brand, Clea Midlife, for your daughters, your wives, your grandmoms, that kind of stuff. Very focused on women's issues. Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. Guy Rocourt, luckily, is not a popular name. So if you Google me, you'll find me talking about this same stuff. And yeah, I encourage everybody to, now is the time to educate ourselves. And that is the number one thing I think citizens can do. When you feel like you can't fight or there's nothing to do, just keep getting educated. because you'll make better choices. And if we're all making better choices, more educated choices, we'll get a better, more educated outcome.
Awesome. I love it. Guy, thank you for spending the time with us today. It's been fantastic. This is a lot of fun. And you really, really educated me on some things I didn't know, which is always just a blessing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And guys, that's it for this episode of the Future Proof Podcast, where leaders and technology come together. Thanks, Guy.
If you're ready to embrace change and lead with innovation, be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Future Proof Podcast.